The Strait of Hormuz closed in February. Your gas bill went up $1.16. One American company will make $9 billion from that. They didn't cause the war. They didn't need to. Who? Before we get to who, you need to understand what they knew that you didn't. The Strait of Hormuz closed in February. Within weeks, gas prices jumped $1.16 a gallon. In California, 7 counties crossed $6. The EIA, the U.S. government's own energy agency, revised its 2026 gasoline forecast up by nearly $1 overnight. That's the part you felt. Here's the part that didn't make the news. The strait isn't just an oil route. Over 30% of the world's urea, the fertilizer that grows corn, wheat, and soybeans, ships through that waterway. When it closed, fertilizer supply tightened. Food production costs rose. The grocery price increases from February haven't fully arrived yet. They're still coming. The Food Policy Institute flagged this in March. The mechanism takes 3 to 6 months to fully hit grocery shelves. The IEA called this the greatest global energy security challenge in history. One waterway, 12 miles wide at its narrowest point, 20% of the world's oil passing through it every single day. And while Americans were paying $5 a gallon, the 2 biggest oil companies in America announced their profits had dropped. Exxon down 45%, Chevron down 36%. Every headline ran that number. Nobody asked the follow-up question. If oil prices spiked 57%, how are the biggest oil companies in America losing money? And if they're losing money, who is actually winning? Here's what the rest of the world assumed would protect America. The United States is the largest oil producer on Earth. More than 13 million barrels a day. Saudi Arabia isn't even close. So when the strait closed, the conventional wisdom was simple. America would be fine. We don't need Middle Eastern oil. We produce our own. That assumption cost American drivers $700 a year. Here's what the conventional wisdom missed. Oil isn't a local product. It's a global commodity. The price you pay at a pump in Ohio isn't set by how much oil comes out of the Permian Basin in Texas. It's set by what oil costs everywhere. London, Singapore, Rotterdam. When supply drops anywhere, the price rises everywhere, simultaneously. Think of it like airline seats. It doesn't matter that the flight from Dallas to Houston is full of Texans. If a hurricane closes 3 major airports on the East Coast, your Dallas ticket gets more expensive too. The market prices scarcity globally, not locally. The strait closure removed 20% of global oil supply overnight. America felt it immediately. Brent crude surged 57% in less than 3 weeks. The EIA forecast wholesale gasoline at nearly $3 a gallon for 2026, almost $1 higher than their February estimate. Jet fuel spiked 95%, forcing airlines to raise baggage fees nationwide. While Asian countries were hoarding fuel and European nations were rationing diesel, something unusual was happening with American oil exports. The countries that normally bought their oil through the strait, Japan, South Korea, India, suddenly needed a new supplier, fast. They called America. U.S. petroleum net exports hit a record, 6.2 million barrels per day more leaving America than entering it, the highest net export figure ever recorded. America wasn't insulated from the crisis. America was selling into it, and one company was more positioned to profit from that than any other. We'll get to the name in a moment. First, you need to understand the mechanism that made it possible. You now know America was selling into the crisis. Here's who built the machine that made that possible, and why they built it before the war started. American oil companies don't just drill, they export. And the infrastructure to export American oil and gas at scale, the pipelines, the terminals, the liquefaction facilities, wasn't built overnight. It was built over a decade of quiet, expensive, strategic investment. Chevron, Exxon, ConocoPhillips, they spent billions building export capacity during years when Middle Eastern oil was cheap and flowing freely. When analysts questioned the logic, the answer was always the same: global demand, long-term positioning, patience. What that infrastructure actually does is this. When Middle Eastern supply is disrupted, American LNG becomes the only alternative at scale for energy-hungry nations in Asia and Europe. There is no other supplier with the capacity to fill that gap quickly. Qatar's facilities were damaged. Russian supply was already sanctioned. Norway can't produce enough. The pipeline from America, both literal and commercial, was the only one open. This is what's called a structural advantage. It doesn't require the company to cause the disruption. It only requires them to be ready when it happens. And the numbers show they were ready. U.S. petroleum product net exports hit 6.2 million barrels per day in April 2026, the highest figure ever recorded. Countries were buying American diesel, American jet fuel, American LNG at premium prices because they had no other choice. Before the war, oil traded around $70 a barrel. By March, Brent crude hit $112. That's a $42 per barrel premium. Multiplied across millions of barrels of daily production and export, that premium compounds into billions of dollars of additional revenue. Every single month, the strait stays closed. Now remember that headline from Part 1. Chevron's profits dropped 36% in Q1. Here's what that headline didn't tell you. The drop was an accounting effect. Chevron had arranged financial hedges before the war, standard industry practice to offset price volatility. When oil prices spiked faster than expected, those hedges showed paper losses. The physical oil hadn't been delivered yet. The gains hadn't been booked yet. Chevron's own CFO said it directly: these impacts will unwind over time. Translation: the 36% drop was temporary. The $9 billion windfall was not. Analysts ran the numbers. If oil held at $100 a barrel for 2026, which the EIA projected it would, one American energy company was on track to book $9.2 billion in what analysts called unearned war profits. $9.2 billion. Not from producing more oil, not from discovering new reserves, from being structurally positioned when a 12-mile waterway closed on the other side of the planet. You've been following the money for 8 minutes now. Here's where it leads. $9.2 billion. One American company. You've been watching the money move for 8 minutes. Here's the name at the end of the trail. Chevron. And the man running it. Mike Wirth. Chairman and CEO of Chevron Corporation since 2018. Here is what Mike Wirth said publicly, while Americans were paying $4.39 a gallon. The impact of events in the Middle East on our company is relatively less than others. Read that again. He's not wrong. Chevron's Middle East exposure is lower than Exxon's. That's technically accurate. What he didn't say, what no journalist asked him to say, is what the crisis was doing to the parts of Chevron that weren't in the Middle East. U.S. production up. Export volume record highs. Revenue per barrel $42 above pre-war baseline. Every barrel Chevron pumped from the Permian Basin, from the Gulf of Mexico, from its operations in Kazakhstan and Australia, every single one of those barrels was selling at war prices. And here is what the Chevron proxy statement filed with the SEC shows. In 2024, before the war, before the strait closed, before any of this, Mike Wirth received total compensation of $32.7 million, a 23.4% increase from the prior year. That same year, median Chevron employee compensation fell 6.8% to $163,000. The CEO made 200 times what the median employee made. in a year before the windfall. Now the war has arrived. The strait is closed. The windfall is being booked quarter by quarter. Here's the domino effect nobody mapped for you. The strait closes. Global oil supply drops 20%. Asian and European buyers panic. They call American exporters. American exporters, led by companies like Chevron, ship record volumes at premium prices. Revenue per barrel jumps $42. Quarterly earnings recover from the accounting timing effect. Full-year projections hit $9.2 billion in unearned war profits. Every dollar of that came from somewhere. It came from your gas tank. And here is the part that should stay with you. This isn't the first time. The Strait of Hormuz has been threatened or partially closed multiple times in the last decade. Iranian tanker attacks in 2019. Houthi disruptions in 2023 and 2024. Each time, the same mechanism fired. Oil prices spiked. American exporters with the right infrastructure recorded revenue surges. Executives collected compensation packages that grew faster than their employees' salaries. The war changes. The waterway stays the same. The winner stays the same. Chevron didn't cause this war. Mike Wirth didn't close the strait. They didn't need to. They just needed to be ready. And they were. This video followed $1.16. That's where it started. $1.16 added to every gallon of gas you've bought since February. An inconvenience that became a budget line. A budget line that became $1,400 a year for a two-car household. Most people stopped there. At the pump, at the number. You didn't. You followed it through a 12-mile waterway in the Persian Gulf, through a global commodity market that prices scarcity everywhere simultaneously, through an accounting sleight of hand that made a 36% profit drop look like bad news when it was actually a delay, through record export volumes and $42 per barrel premiums, all the way to a proxy statement filed quietly with the SEC showing a CEO whose compensation rose 23% in the year before a $9 billion windfall arrived. Here is what that trail tells you. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. Infrastructure built over a decade positioned one company to benefit from a crisis it didn't create. Compensation structures reward executives for outcomes their companies were structurally positioned to receive regardless of skill or decision-making. Accounting conventions allow temporary losses to obscure long-term gains until the headlines have moved on. None of this required a conspiracy. It required positioning. And here is the part that matters most. The Strait of Hormuz will be threatened again. Not because anyone wants another war, because the geography hasn't changed. Iran sits on one side, Oman on the other. 20% of the world's oil has no other route. That choke point has existed for centuries and will exist for decades more. Every time it closes, or threatens to close, the same mechanism fires. The same infrastructure activates. The same export volumes surge. The same per-barrel premiums accumulate. The same proxy statements get filed. The names at the top might change, the structure won't. You paid $1.16 a gallon to learn something most people never find out. The price at the pump isn't set by the market, it's set by geography. And the people who understood the geography and built around it collected $9 billion while you filled your tank. That's not an accident. That's not a conspiracy. That's a system. And now you know how it works. It is always about the money.